Hey, you are listening to Oh Crap Parenting with me, your host, Jamie Glowacki. This is a podcast for conscious parents who drop the F-bomb a lot. Welcome. I am so excited. Today I am interviewing Jeanne-Marie Paynel. She's a Master of Education and hosts the Art of Parenting podcast and is the founder of Your Parenting Mentor, where she guides expectant parents, caregivers, and parents of young children to prepare their homes and themselves for early childhood. She is a birth doula, a parenting mentor, a Montessori home and school consultant, supporting parents and caregivers to raise the next generation of good-hearted humans confidently. Welcome. Jeanne-Marie and I go back a long way. I forget how we met. We did like a summit or something together.
We did a summit like many years ago when I was doing Be the Best Parent You Can Be summits. Yep. And I remember I interviewed you then, and I think we just hit it off, and we've been kind of cheerleading each other ever since. So it's good to be here.
Yeah. And I was reminded I was just on your podcast, which was super fun. We just jammed and jammed and jammed. So we'll jam today. Is there anything you want to tell my audience about you that I didn't include in your quick bio there?
I'm also the mother of 2 young adults that I think that's my most proud thing to know that I did, I did the best job I could. I always thought, they'll say, oh, you did it all wrong. But today they are well-adjusted young adults doing their thing. I have my daughter is in England and my son right now is traveling through Europe. So it's just nice to know that they're happy doing their thing and well-adjusted human beings. 27 and 23.
Oh, nice. Well, Pascal just turned 18 on June 1st. And
yes, I saw that. Congratulations. You made it.
I'm like, I raised a whole human. And it cracks me up because, you and I have both been in the parenting space for a long time. And with the advent and rise of social media, I just think it's wild how these accounts can get so big. And it's, and it's a mom, and we can all use a village, and we can all use, snippets from, people and things they find helpful. But oftentimes, like even in the potty training space, I will see parents who are like mid potty training one child and totally giving advice. And for me personally, and I'm not trying to gatekeep anything, but I even said when I was investigating homeschooling years ago for Pascal, I met with people who had teenagers or college students who had homeschooled, because I was like, I want to see the finished product. I want to see the finished product.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that. It's like, I want to, not that we have to hold the only spots in the space, but like, if you want parenting advice, look for somebody who's done it and done it well,
And that's the same, that's the same in business. We always say, if you want to have like business advice, look at people who are actually doing it and successful and have, not just the new kid on the block who,
right.
I don't know, went viral or something. So
right. I want to see my financial advisor's paperwork.
Exactly.
Today, I really want to delve into your expertise on 2 subjects. One is Montessori, because you're a school and home consultant. And I do find that Montessori is being sort of bastardized. I know that is it not trademarked or something? There's schools that can use that name, but they're not true Montessori.
Exactly. So contrary to like the Waldorf method, Montessori was never copyrighted.
Okay.
So, Montessori is a proper name. It was Dr. Maria Montessori, more than 150 years ago, who created this way of understanding human development, right? I don't even want to say a method, or it's really, she spent a lot of time observing children, observing babies, observing humans, and just revealed to us what the child needed. And today, a lot of that is being proven by, brain scans and so forth. And so, but the method itself was never copyrighted. So yes, anybody can basically, said, I'm a Montessori school. I've read a book. I like this and I'm going to do it. And I've personally gone into schools where some of the main principles are not being dealt with. And one of them was, I went to visit a school when my son was really young, and I was wanting to change him schools. And one of the things that really surprised me is the teachers were telling the children what work to do. And one of the main principles is freedom of choice, right? That we know that children are attracted to, very important work, and they know within themselves what they need to master. And I asked the director, I said, what about the principle of, the freedom of choice? And she said, oh, that doesn't work for us. I'm like, hello. And they were calling themselves a Montessori school. So I always say to parents, really, really do your homework on knowing what the principles are. And we'll gladly share that with you, but really do your homework and go and observe. Really spend some time looking, observing, seeing the children's, level of engagement, of happiness, of how adults are talking to them. And this is true, honestly, for any school. If you're going to put your child in a setting outside the home, spend some time just observing and getting a feeling, getting that gut feeling of whether your child will thrive there or not.
Yeah. I would love to hear about the principles. I think so many people, again, with the rise of social media, they've really equated Montessori with an aesthetic, like the wooden toys, the beige, and a lot of this stuff is expensive. There's a great Instagram account where the woman does she's totally immersed in the Montessori way, but shows how you can recreate some of these not toys, but activities with household items rather than the $200 block set.
Exactly. I actually have a YouTube channel, The Art of Parenting, where I have a lot of little videos. They're just 2-minute little videos of just things you can do with what you already have in your home.
Oh, that's great. I'll put that in the show notes.
No need to go buy things. And so, yes, I think Montessori has gotten this label of, more about aesthetics. And there is some truth to that, because there is this idea that beauty attracts, that we need to, have these engaging environments. And I remember, being in the classroom, I really took a lot of pride in creating this environment and having nice vases for flowers, because there was flower arrangements and so all that, because it's true, beauty attracts, and we have fragile things that are going to break because the children are know that that's delicate and it's beautiful. So there is a tinge of truth to that, and the whole beige colors and all that is just because when a child first, comes to us, everything is brand new. So don't bombard them with, loud colors everywhere and all that, which, some preschool settings are like that. Some nurseries are like that. Right. And it's just too much. So, there is some truth to that, but that's not all there is, basically, right?
Sure.
It's not about what's on the shelf and how you decorate your home.
I think it's a simplicity too, the rotating of very few toys in the room.
Exactly.
You can certainly have an aesthetic. You can have beautiful, delicate vases that you got at a thrift store. It doesn't have to be this expensive.
It's all thrift
I think it's
store.
just become this expensive, No.
It's all thrift store. It's all garage sales. It's all, it's getting the free stuff you see. That's how you create it. But basically the main principles is that it is child driven. Right? It is this notion that we are all born with this intrinsic need to learn. We're curious. We want to master certain skills. Our children are watching us. They observe us. So what they see us do, they want to do the same thing, and they want to master those skills. So we set up an environment where those skills are going to be available for them to practice and to master. Mm-hmm. And so it's really about following their lead, right? The big saying in Montessori is follow the child, but follow the child as their leader, right? We are kind of paving the way as well. We're not just, it's not a free for all. And I think that's also another kind of bad label that Montessori gets. So it's very child driven, as opposed to your more conventional schools, maybe, where it's the adult who is deciding what 25 children need to focus on today. When we all know that, you have 25 people in a room, you have very different interests, and not everybody's going to want to be doing the same thing. Right. So that's a big one. The other thing, and I've kind of mentioned this, is this idea that we talk about the prepared environment. And so we are really being very intentional, very meticulous about creating an environment for the child to fulfill their needs at different developmental stages, mm-hmm. right? A home for a newborn is going to look very different than for a 3-year-old, for example. And so we're following the child as we also kind of tweak the environment for their needs. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing within the school setting, one of the big ones, and I think some of the schools, that call themselves Montessori don't get this one, is this idea of mixed age classrooms. Oh, yes. Very, very important. That this is like really big for socialization, that, we basically, I was in a classroom with 2.5-year-olds to 6-year-olds. Mm-hmm. So I had them for 3 years. And it's just beautiful to see the progression and the evolution. And then, the older child taking such pride in helping the younger mm-hmm. one because they've mastered a skill and they want to show. So it's really recreating that family environment where we have younger and older siblings and we learn from each other. And it just makes a very, cohesive, beautiful group, as opposed to, having a classroom with just 3-year-olds. I mean, yeah, you go bonkers, and it's not, and the 3-year-old doesn't learn from what it's like to be a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old,
and it's
right?
So powerful for kids. It's so powerful. Like, even when I have clients who are struggling with potty training and have older kids, I'm like, have the older kids help out, because they take it so much more seriously from the big kid. Like, we're grown-ups, we're useless. We don't know how to play.
So true.
But
so
the
true.
big kids in my son's preschool, he had gone to a very typical daycare and then a typical preschool, and I hated it. And he managed to get bit 5 times in one day. And I was like, I don't know what's going on here, and like big bites. And so, I took him out, and I found the University of Rhode Island has a child development center, and they weren't officially Montessori, but followed these tenets. And I cried when I walked into that classroom, and they had scissors and paint and tape, like everything. Everything was just out in the open. I was like, how come the kids aren't abusing this? And they were like, they don't know. And it was mixed ages, and the 6-year-olds were like, come on in, we'll show you around. And the teachers just kind of hovered, making sure no fights broke out, if anybody needed assistance. But the older kids really took over. And I was like, this is miraculous. They set tablecloths at lunchtime and real pitchers of water. And the big kid would help the little kid learn how to pour the water. And it was so beautiful to watch. And then watching my own son be like, he hit 4 and he was like, you got to teach me to tie my shoes, because there were tires. And if you were a tire, you could help the other kids tie their shoes. And that was like, man, you were like the CEO. And so, like, he was so motivated because he wanted to be the helpful one, and I think we're lacking, like, kids have become so siloed. And they get self-centered, they get entitled. And when they're actually getting the benefit of helping other kids, it's so beautiful. I mean, I cried all the time at this school because I was like, oh my God, this is so great.
Yeah, no, and it's beautiful to observe, like, as their guide. And that's one thing. We don't call ourselves teachers. We're guides. We
like that.
we set up the environment, we guide them along. And it's just, it's just so empowering to see that, 5.5-year-old just show the new 2.5-year-old, where things are, how to do things. And also for me, it was a way to make sure that they had mastered the lesson. For example, I would say, oh, would you mind showing your friend how to do this and that? And I would observe. And it's like, oh my gosh, they totally understand the concept, and it's wonderful. So
there's so many parallels, I feel like, to my homeschooling, because, same thing is like people would say, like, you teach him everything. And I was like, oh, hell no, I'm a facilitator. No.
Exactly.
I sit down at 4th grade math. No. I find him the people. I find.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so that's a big one. The other one, and I think this, Montessori kind of gets a bad rap for this, is, it's the school where kids do whatever they want. And no, it's children. We trust that children know what they need to learn, right? Because we have set up the environment with, like you say, the pitcher and the water, or the, tying shoes, or the language, or the sensorial, or the mathematics. And to be honest, like, the curriculum itself is just way, way, way more advanced than your conventional schools. Like, a child who is in a Montessori school will leave at 6, can enter 1st grade, knowing how to read and write, knowing all of the math operations, knowing the names of all the countries and the flags, and, it's just, and music, and it's just amazing. Yeah. So it's just beyond what we can think of it. And oftentimes people think, children can't know all that, but we follow their lead. They're curious. They want to know more. And, depending if you have a child who's, super intrigued with geography, they're going to learn all those countries, very quickly.
Yes.
I mean, it was hard to keep up with them sometimes, because they just like, they're a sponge. Yeah. They're a sponge. And that's the thing. That was one of the big things of Dr. Montessori, is realizing, what she, and her book is The Absorbent Mind, is that concept of that child's brain is a sponge those first 6 years. And so to really, feed that curiosity and feed the fact that they can learn with so much ease, because they're going through these sensitive periods, which means that they're very in tune to just one aspect of learning, whether it's movement, whether it's language, whether it's mathematics. And if you're observing and following their lead, you feed that, and they leave there knowing their multiplication tables like it's nothing, right? As opposed to waiting till later when it's a struggle and it's more of a chore and so forth.
Or they dish it. It's funny you mentioned multiplication, because I took Pascal out of school when he was in the middle of 1st grade, and he had on his own figured out the multiplication tables.
Exactly.
And I remember I struggled with math, and I remember memorizing them, but I remember like I had to have been 25 before I realized 3 groups of 3 equals 9. Like, I just memorized 3 times 3 equals 9, right? And so,
right.
And he could figure it out. And I went to his teacher, and she said, "Oh, we're not there yet. So you can teach him that at home if you want." And I was like, okay, so I think you're telling me to homeschool, because just effortless.
No, yeah. And it's funny because I remember a little girl who was in my class who left. So she graduated. She went on to 1st grade to a posh private school, 1st grade, and her sister was still in the school. So her mother would come to pick up her younger sister. And one day she handed me the phone, and she says, her name was Lily, wants to talk to you. And she said, "Miss Jenny," so that was my name in the classroom, "Miss Jenny, they don't know what division is here." Because she had gone through it. She knew all of the mathematical operations because the thing is you have to understand that Montessori is taught with very didactic material. It's hands-on, it's sensorial, and where we have these beautiful golden beads. We exchange, we work in a group. So it's fun. It's different. Yeah. And so they absorb it, right? Yeah. With ease. Yeah. So very different. So going back to, the school is where children do whatever they want. there's limits and order within the environment,
Sure.
right? So first of all, the fact that we have prepared the environment, there's, like you said, there's scissors, but there's just one pair of scissors. There's not 25 pairs of scissors.
Right.
We have to wait our turn. We're going to, maybe we haven't had that lesson yet. So we can't use them just yet or other things. So there's always just one set of activity for a group.
Yep.
So that's a limit, right? It's not this abundance and everybody can do the same thing.
Right.
No, we have to wait our turn or we have to go choose something else or, so that's a limit. And then the environment itself is very orderly. Things are always put back at the same place because we know that children at a young age are very, very sensitive to order, right? To the physical order, to routines, how we do things. So that's why we've prepared the environment for it to have that visual order, which gives them internal order, right? It's an environment that is messy, chaotic, is just overwhelming for the young child's brain. So we really, and that's, that is part of that Montessori aesthetic is it's minimalist, it's simple, things go back to their place. So there's that. The other thing, the big one that I mentioned earlier when I went to visit a school is this freedom of choice, that we're not imposing on the child that they have to do certain things, right? There are certain rules, right? Because there are limits. We don't interrupt our friends who are working. If we want to observe, we often observe with our hands behind our back, so we're not tempted to touch, things like that. But otherwise, as long as you've had a lesson on all the different material, you're free to choose whatever you want to work on. And if you're wanting to just sit and observe, that's okay too, right? It's not, we're not telling them what to do. And I think that's really important. And, it's just beautiful to see an environment that is flowing well. And I'll be perfectly honest, those first few weeks are a bit chaotic, being the adult in the classroom. Once they settle in, as the adult, you get the opportunity to sit on your stool and observe this classroom of children just doing their thing. And they're doing their thing. I just want to make a precision on this, is because they've been given a lesson. And then they have the choice to repeat that lesson as many times as they need to master the concept. So oftentimes a child will come in the morning and, I would just say, good morning. And, what a beautiful day. What would you like to work on today? And they would go off and choose. And that's their prerogative. When I see and I observe that they need the next challenge, that's when I step in and give the next lesson or do a group lesson or things like that. So they're really choosing from their own needs. And that's super important.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think, this is a concept that is not talked much about, is that within that first age group, so birth to 6, so Montessori had this beautiful concept called the constructive rhythm of life, which are the 4 planes of development.
Okay.
And I have a little handout if I can share with you afterwards. Okay. But it's basically kind of these peaks and valleys of how children develop. And so those first 6 years, and they're 6, they 0 to 3 goes up, 3 to 6, and then 6 to 9, 9 to 12, until 24, basically. And so the first 6 years, it is believed, at least in the Montessori philosophy, that we need to give children concrete and realistic information. So we tend to stay away from fantasy. We really base it in reality, as opposed to maybe like a Waldorf school that is very kind of seeped in fantasies and there's fairies and gnomes and that's how they teach concepts. And that's that's beautiful. That's one way. But Montessori is very much into giving concrete information to children because that's what they want. They're asking us, what is this? Why does this work like this? What is this? What is this? What is this? And so we have to give them the truth. We have to give them, the real names of things, right? And it's important to know your proper vocabulary, right? To give the real names of animals and to give the sounds of animals. Like I had language cards of, the sounds different animals make. And so it's reality based. And I think that's something that I see some people, saying they're doing Montessori get a little confused there because, then it's all about fairy tales and all of that. So that's another one.
Does that include Santa and things like that?
So that's funny. It's always a good conversation that we have around the holidays. Not necessarily. Okay. No, Santa is a big lie.
Yeah.
Like it's a made up, it's an adult that made up a story. And if you go back, it's marketing, who knows what Santa is, right? So we can say Santa Claus is a story that we like to tell at this time of year, but never would you say, if you're good or you're bad.
Oh yeah. I think generally we're over that. At least if you're
I'm sorry, but the whole, elf on a shelf, I find that really kind of toxic. It's like you got this thing watching you. And
no, I hate it.
Just, I'm going to go tell on you. It's just, no, I don't like that. And so that's a lie. That's playing with a child's mind that is just developing when they just want to know the truth. They want to know things. So yeah, that's a great question.
And they're very black and white at that age. Toddlers are black and white.
Very much so.
Yeah. And I subscribe to most of my work is based off of Kim Jeanne-Paynel, 0 to 6 govern, 6 to 12 garden, and 12 to 18 guide. And the govern, I feel like falls in that. It's like, people, it's not authoritarian, but you're establishing the boundaries, the rules of your house, your environment, how you guys react to each other. And so it is that black and white, parents will come to me and say, I'm worried about my relationship with my 2-year-old. And I was like, I'm not really sure you have a full relationship yet. Like there's bonding happening. You're laying the groundwork. Like I feel like the relationship, of course you have a relationship with them, but your 2-year-old's not equal in conversation, they're equal in humanity, but the gardening phase, I said, wait till 6 to 12. Oh, exactly. That's when that's gardening. You planted the seeds. Now you get to look at it grow,
Yes. Yeah.
So I think it falls in line. Yeah.
Definitely. And it's interesting when you say about the boundaries and everything, to go back to that limit and order. To me, we always say that it's freedom within limits. So you are free to do whatever, you want in this environment if you respect the limits of it, the rules of it. And I think that's really important in our homes as well, right? Sure. A child who has no boundaries is a child who is just completely overwhelmed, and it's just unfair to put that, pressure on them.
Jeanne-Marie, I do this, do you remember the Jungle Book? Do you remember the original Jungle Book? There was, I think it was the snake who got hypnotized.
Yes.
And he had those swirly eyes. That's what kids with no boundaries look like. You can see them on the playground and they are free falling through life. And I do want to, I want to finish up these developmental peaks and valleys because that's interesting. But, I really want to dig into the follow the child, because this gentle parenting swing that's happening now in my work, I feel like people have got it reversed. It's like, they control their children's play, they control their children's day, they control their children's interests, but they follow their lead in life and they let the child run the household. And it's backwards because I'm like, no. They get freedom of choice with limits, right? We don't let them just go out the front door. We keep them in a fenced-in area in the backyard. You can do whatever you want in that fenced-in area as long as it's safe, right?
Right, and that's the beauty of the prepared environment, right? You're preparing your home that that secure environment for it to, yes, you want it to be a yes environment because it's a lot less, takes a lot of pressure off of you to always be, watching what they're going to get
environment.
into.
I love that. You want it to be a yes
and
environment.
that's for and that's for your own good as well, right? Because depending on their age, when they are crawling around your home, there are certain things that you just need to move up.
Yeah.
And it's just temporary. You're just preparing the environment for this person to be living in their home that you happen to share with them, right? Just like you would prepare, the guest room for, an elderly aunt that is coming who's maybe using a walker. You're going to have to move some furniture around to make it easier, right? So you're preparing the environment for them to have that freedom of movement. And that's another big, big aspect of Montessori is this freedom of movement, meaning that we do not tell a child to sit still for however many hours,
Don't
right?
get me started.
But it's pure torture. I mean, you and I know that it's pure torture to ask a child to sit still because movement is life. Like we're moving from the moment of conception until our last breath. And to try to restrain that is just, makes them unhappy and so forth. So movement is actually used a lot in the classroom, right? Like I would sit as far away from a shelf where I needed a child to go get something so that there's movement within the activity.
Right.
We have this beautiful activity where we walk on the line, where we're working on our equilibrium, where, it's just, so yes, there's a lot of different aspects that help them develop, the whole child, not only their brain, but their movement, their everything.
The yes environment too. I just love that because, what is it? I think a 2-year-old has heard the word no, like something like 400,000 times in 2 years. I'm thinking of, Instagram does have its benefits. And one of the things is you see these kids, raised in a Montessori household and maybe a school, but they now have these kitchens with pumps so they can wash their own dishes. And I saw this one little kid, oh my God, it was like 2.5 or 3, had some sort of version of a hot plate that, it was hot, but it wouldn't like really scald him. But he made his own scrambled eggs at his play kitchen. And we're busy buying plastic kitchens with the fake pans and the fake food. And I'm like, whoa. And that was like such a yes. And the mom, she said this was built over time. She said, I don't have to supervise him anymore, but I did for a long time and be there to, observe and help. But what a yes environment. I'm hungry and I can go cook my own eggs when I'm 3.
Exactly. And that's what I do when I go into people's homes is I look at it from the child's perspective. Like what can a child already do and how can we make those things accessible, right? So there, the hot plate idea, for example, yes, but you might not leave it out all the time, but they know that they will have access to it. And to be honest, like if you observe in what we call a toddler classroom, so this is kind of the new walkers until about 2.5. They're preparing food for themselves and for their friends. Yeah. And in the casa where I was, we leave food out for it to be prepared. So they prepare snack for the entire classroom. They cook because we have prepared it. Ironing, for example, that is a beautiful activity, but you prepare the iron ahead of time where you make sure the dial doesn't go all the way up.
Right.
And what a beautiful activity. They love it.
Yeah.
So things like that where we're really trusting the child. I think that to me, that is the main thing, is that we're trusting the process and we're trusting that the child, if they're given those boundaries and if it's set up properly, they're capable of so much more than
I just see
we
such
give
an
them credit for.
infantilizing, like kids. This was the first year ever. Listen, I have 6 families that contacted me that they were going to delay kindergarten because their 6-year-old wasn't ready for potty training. And I was like, you missed the mark here. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm neurotypical kids, you know? And I said, this idea that they're not capable of these mastering a bodily function when we know they're capable by 2, you know, and capable of cooking food for themselves or preparing snacks. You know, I just think we underestimate them. And I keep preaching that, like, we can't sit a kid in front of YouTube Kids while we make dinner and then expect them at 12 to prepare their own food. Like, you have to lay this groundwork early, you know? And they want to do it anyway. Like, what you watch kids play, they're playing the adult things. So we might as well let them into like a little bit more of the reality of that.
It's so true. I mean, that's just something that I do have families that, call me and complain because they can't get anything done because, their child wants to be with them. And I said, well, yes, they do want to be with them. So involve them, bring them in, invite them in, give them just a potato to wash, but that's what they want. They've been observing us. They want to be doing what we're doing. And that's, that's a big aspect of the Montessori classroom for the young children is we call it practical life. It's all of these things that they have been watching us do and watching, people at home doing that they want to be doing for themselves. So, pouring and washing things and preparing food and polishing shoes and ironing, whatever it is. And so we set it up for them to master those skills.
Yeah. It reminds me too, when you said you started with, the beautiful vases and that they're delicate. And one of the things I've been rallying against is sippy cups, all versions of sippy cups, because I actually have a plastic cup here I can show. I said, there is no cause and effect when a child can drink and toss their cup around. Like, then there's no perfect age where they're just going to all of a sudden use a cup properly. And I was a stickler for using real plates and real glasses. And I didn't have any plastic stuff because I was like, you can't throw that. It will break. It's delicate, and probably one time he shoved it off the table, and it broke and he was horrified. And I was like, that's what things break, And so I feel like there's an infantilizing as well with like all the plastic or like the idea, there's no cause and effect. If you can throw a plastic plate and it doesn't break, you can continue to throw it.
Yeah. And don't get me started on this, Jamie, because there are so many things that we have created to facilitate things for the adult, but that are developmentally inappropriate for our children.
Yeah.
Such as the sippy cup. Oh my goodness, their t-shirt are going to be wet while they learn to drink out of a regular cup. Big deal. Like
Velcro.
Things
Do you know
like that.
how hard it is to find shoes that don't Velcro to tie? Because there's a whole generation of kids who's not going to know how to tie shoes. Make it a simple knot because the Velcro's easier. It's hard.
Or the Crocs where they just or the pouches to
don't get me started.
Exactly. So let's offline.
Oh no, my audience knows I rail against the pouches all the time. Did you know we're actually seeing developmental problems? Kids are their jaws are getting more narrow because of soft food. They're not chewing enough, and the pouches, and we have infants now with sleep apnea. Like, we're seeing actual evolutionary changes in real time that normally would take tens of thousands of years to see. And so I'm a big one on like, give them a bone to chew on. So can we talk about how do we take these concepts and parents can do this at home? Because you may not have a Montessori school near you, or you may not be able to afford it. But these concepts can play out. Like, when you go into somebody's home, sort of what are the first things you look for, or some big overarching things that you would help them with?
So depending on the age, it's gonna be a little different. But one of the things that I would have parents kind of consider is, what is your child constantly asking you for?
Okay.
So, I'm thirsty. Can I have some water? Can I have some water? Can I have some water? You know, and I remember doing this consultation with a family who their child was going to go to a Montessori school. I think he was 3, and they had a 9-month-old as well. And I don't know, we probably were interrupted, you know, about 20 times because this child wanted some water. And we know children, they'll take a sip and go off and do something else. And I said, well, why don't you put some cups down by the water fountain and he can get his own water? Oh my goodness. Like that was like, ah.
Yeah.
But it's little things like that,
think
right?
about. Sure.
So it's, you know, and it's again, like you were saying about, you know, if a child is capable of preparing food, like let's put some child size, good quality utensils. So not these, you know, play kitchen wooden things that don't work, but like, you know, real tools that are going to work, so that they can prepare things for themselves. Right. There is also for me, you know, when they're young is to consider some of the artwork, some of the family photos to bring them down low to their eyesight.
Yes.
Because, you know, we tend to decorate our homes for our vision.
Right.
And we're not taking them into consideration. So especially, you know, when they're crawling around, like have things down low that they can look at. Family photos, I think, are always great for language and for our family history and all that. It's wonderful conversation, storytelling. Yep. Also, the other thing is, you know, I have parents that have trouble with their children, like getting dressed in the morning or things like that. Here, I would really simplify things. So bring down bring down the rod to put things down low at their level. And on there, only put, you know, 2 or 3 outfits. That's it. That you're okay with, that you've already pre-selected, because you're preparing the environment, right? We're not opening up the closet and saying, well, would you like to wear today? Because you know they're going to choose the one thing you really don't want them to wear. So just don't do that, right? So again, it's just bringing things down to their level. And, you know, for example, like pre-dressing, it could be a basket with a few socks where the child is just going to practice putting on and off the socks, putting on and off the socks. They love doing that. Keeps them busy, keeps them, and they're practicing a skill, right? So for me, in a home, it's about simplicity. It's about really observing your child without any preconceived ideas, without comparing them to the kid on social media or your next door neighbors or whatever, watching your child, what they tend to be interested in, what they tend to gravitate towards, what they're asking you for. And that's how you start preparing that environment that is appropriate to their specific needs. And for you know, new families, I actually encourage them to sit on the floor, look at their environment from their child's perspective, crawl around their homes, see it from their child's perspective, and you'll see things differently, and you'll understand more what their needs are.
Yeah. And when you observe and you take that time, I think we always have to be like super active with our kids, you know, and we talk too much. And somebody just introduced me to an acronym, WAIT. Why am I talking? I think that's a really great question to ask yourself, you know, and it's the same thing, you know, I experienced with homeschooling. People would be like, you know, like, how do you know? And I said, your ears you hear differently once you start homeschooling. You pick up on interest because somebody else isn't leading the show. If your kid's in school, you spend time doing homework according to what the teacher wants done. But when you're homeschooling, it is that you have the luxury of following the child's interest, but your ears perk up and you see things. You're like, wait, your antenna goes up. You're like, oh, here's something. And then on the flip side, you know, I remember Pascal was like getting into breakdancing, and I was like, oh, do you want to take like a hip hop class? And he was like, Mom, sometimes I just like things. I don't have to take a class. It's like,
Exactly.
right, okay.
Exactly. But that's the beauty, is like you follow their lead by the questions they're asking you.
Yeah.
And that's what you teach on. And just to another acronym that I like to share for engaging our children at home and maybe wanting to show them a new skill. And I think, like you just mentioned, we tend to talk way too much, and children will tune off after, a few words. So I use the acronym SHOW. When you want to show something, you slow your hands and you omit words.
Oh, nice.
So basically because we're, like this little gadget thing, I'm going to show you, look at this. I have a ball that can open. Do you want to see how this opens? That's it. Had I talked about it like, oh, you put your fingers, you unscrew it, you do this, you do that, like they've lost interest, right? We want to slow our hands so that they can really observe and really take in the information so that they can then repeat it.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to us, like, we tend to over-explain, over-lecture, and just, blah, 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 blah.
That came out of something. It was, oh my God. I remember going to a friend's house and they had, somebody along the way had told her, you should narrate. It helps with language. And this woman, when I tell you, I was like, shut up. She was narrating, I was like, and now I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to walk over to the stove and I'm going to take out a pan. And I was like, your kid can't be listening to you. This can't help language. If anything, I'd be like, I'm never speaking again.
No. Yeah. They've tuned out. I mean, I like, what is it? Janet Linsbury talks about sports casting, like when you're at the playground or things like that, when there's like something going on, you can say what you see.
Right.
But that's about it, no. And yes, giving language is very important, but we tend to like this self-importance of just having to talk way too much. So yeah.
Well,
slow
I think
hands,
it goes back
omit
to
words.
that. It goes back to that kids are empty vessels that need to be filled, right? Like some people have that idea, like I need to cram them full.
Nope.
Whereas I subscribe to they came into the world, but I just got to be the bumpers on the bowling alley.
Exactly. Yeah. No, and their brain are mighty, mighty powerful.
Yeah.
Especially young ones.
And then the thing I love too is that I do love the aesthetic, seeing these bedrooms and these houses where there's a 3-shelf, low shelf, and there's maybe 3 items on each shelf, beautifully displayed, has its own spot. The book is open, and I really think we're getting mired in, I don't know that it's just consumerism. I've really tracked it down to these open concept homes that are just full of space that parents feel like they have to fill it. And I usually have people, if I'm not going in home, film their space. And I'm like, holy crap, that's a lot of crap. Like we gotta, and they're struggling. They're struggling with their kids just throwing things, dumping bins out, too many books, not able to choose a book at the end of the night. And I think a child, like we love books, we want to raise readers, but when you look in a child's bedroom and it's a whole bookshelf full of books, yeah, they're going to pull them out. They're going to have a hard time at night choosing a book.
Exactly. And we have to remember, the children are brand new on this planet.
Yes.
Like everything is new. So why overwhelm them with, this just, I mean, I have been in homes where, I start having a panic attack. So I cannot imagine that toddler in there and, and the reason why they're just like bouncing off the wall because there's big imagery on the walls, there's toys everywhere and all that. And it's just an overstimulation and they can't handle it. So definitely, when I do, home consultation, it's definitely like, taking it a step down. What I love is helping them set up the nursery from the beginning. And really, when I say nursery, I'm talking about a developmentally appropriate environment for the child, not a pretty thing to put on Instagram
Right.
of, look at my beautiful nursery. This
Right.
is in Montessori, we actually don't use a crib. We use a floor bed,
Yep.
which is basically this concept of creating a limit. Again, it's a physical limit. It's a mattress on the floor, or in a bed frame. There's some beautiful Montessori beds that you can get, but it's trusting the child that as they have that freedom of movement, they're going to slither to the edge of the bed. They're going to feel the difference, and they're going to slither back, right? And yes, they might roll off, but it is only a mattress on the floor,
Right.
so they're not falling out of their crib.
Right.
It's and to me, that again is trusting the process, where a child who has a floor bed from the beginning will learn that that is where they go to rest. And when they are tired, they will go there. And when they're done resting, well, they will just get up and go play with their toys or come see us. They're not, screaming bloody murder of get me out of this crib or whatever. So again, it's really setting up this environment where we're trusting the child and we're really helping them nurture that independence that is a basic human need that we all have, is to be independent.
Yeah. And I think it's wild. Like I often have some sleep experts on here, and there's this new trend of keep them in the crib till past 4. And I'm like, but we're expecting autonomy. Like, and so it comes up a lot in my potty training work, because they're like, oh, they're not self-initiating. They won't take this, they won't take the task on as their own. And I was like, well, the first thing you do is get them out of their little cage. And I said, I don't mean to sound brutal, but a crib is a cage, and that's how we use it.
It is. It is.
And I said, if you have to, the first thing you have to do is have somebody help you get out of bed. You can't expect them to act like a big kid in their lives. You're keeping them in a baby situation when, they've moved on.
Yeah. And again, like we were talking about the sippy cup and the this and that, these are things that were created to appease the adult, because it feels a lot safer to an adult to put a child in a cage, in a container. Montessori homes are free of containers, right? We don't have cribs, we don't have exercisers, all of these things. We're letting the child develop naturally on their own terms and so forth. But yeah, putting a child in a container, they're dependent on you to read their cues of when they're tired, and they're dependent on you to get out of bed. I mean, who wants that? Nobody.
Right. Well, and I think what we're seeing is, these don't sound cataclysmic in and of themselves, but I think what we're starting to see is this downward spiral. I'm seeing very incapable 5-year-olds who don't have really any skills, but more importantly, don't have confidence and that self-esteem. And parents these days, a lot of parents seem to think that just praise is what builds self-esteem, and it's not. It's doing these things for yourself and having autonomy and that freedom of movement and trusting. That trust in our kids is so important. That it's so under the surface, but it's so vital.
Yeah. And one of the phrases in Montessori is help me to do it by myself.
Yes.
That's what they want from us.
Right.
So that's why preparing our homes, that yes space and all of that is to help the child know that they can do it on themselves. Because, if you think of it, like we're all on let's say on 2 psychological legs, at least children, we stand on 2 legs. First is trust in the world, right? Trust that we were born in a safe place, a loving place, we're accepted and so forth. And this is, newborn, when we're responding to their needs. And then it's that trust in myself, I can do things. Right. So if we're taking away all of that and never letting them do things for themselves, well, we.
But then I think too, what happens is I think people think I've done podcasts on this before where there's this like magical age where they just will know. Like, no, you can't use scissors. No, you can't use scissors. Oh, you're 6 years old. How are you not using scissors? And it's like, no, we have to pave the way too, in increments.
Exactly. And I love that you say that, because in Montessori, like, a lot of the sequence is all like these exercises that prepare you for later work, right? So earlier I mentioned this idea that we do a lot of practical life, right? We scrub tables and we wash things and all that. And I remember parents were like, well, why are you showing my child how to do housework?
Right.
It's like, it's a preparation to later work, because scrubbing a table, for example, we do it in such a manner that it's preparing the hand to write later.
Right.
We're going in the sequence of writing, right? Or all of the cubes that we pick up and everything, we're preparing the pencil grip. So it's all these preliminary exercises that are going to prepare the child for, higher academic work later.
For sure. We have been talking for an hour, if you can believe it.
Woo-hoo.
I know. I could talk to you forever. But when I did your podcast, I mentioned having a series. I'd love to have you back on. I would love to talk about positive discipline. I would love to talk about your doula work. But this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
And,
thank you.
Just remind people where they can find you, social, podcasts, all the things.
So the podcast is The Art of Parenting, found wherever you listen to your podcast. My website is Your Parenting Mentor, where you can find some downloads. I have some activities, Montessori, Nursery, all of that. And that's it. Your Instagram is Your Parenting Mentor as well. But I'm trying to pull away from social media. So
it's brutal, isn't it? It's brutal. And your YouTube is The Art of Parenting too, right?
My YouTube is The Art of Parenting, yes. And there you can find lots of different ideas for little activities to do at home. And I'm going to start uploading my podcast there as well. So.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
yes.
Thank you
Thank
again.
you, Jamie.
All right. Take care, you guys.
Thank
As
you.
always, have a beautiful day and rock on.
Okay, bye everyone. Just a reminder, if you need additional resources, I have Oh Crap Potty Training. I have Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler. Those books are available everywhere you want to find a book. You can also go to my website, jamieglowacki.com, where you can book private sessions with me, buy any of my courses. Those are really geared towards potty training help. And also I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore, and I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, jamie.glowacki, and I do a lot of lives and usually posting a lot of good information. So those are extra resources for you. And as always, rock on. Have an awesome day.